So this day I went to work, and I'm working in a maximum security prison, and I go up to the door, and we have this little trap door, and I open it up, knowing the person who is sitting behind the door was one person that I'd had a conversation with. And probably around about 6 months beforehand, I'd met him in the kitchen. And he was explaining to me, he says, Miss, I'm going to get out. I'm going to get out in 3 weeks. I'm so excited. I said, what are you going to do? And he said, I'm going to be a baker. Baker, I love baking. I love doing stuff. I like making stuff. And I'm going to see my girlfriend. I'm going to get back with her, and I'm going to make a difference with my life. And life is going to be so exciting. And I said, and I could feel this energy about him, and I knew that sincerely he was going to do it. All right. I said, good luck. All right. And I really got caught up in his energy. And then around about after the 3 weeks, he got out, and I went to work. And that night, I'd heard that he'd murdered his girlfriend within 12 hours. And I'm thinking, oh my God, why would he have done that? Most people, when I explain this story to them, get into the shock of the story. I'm not in the shock of the story. I'm in, why would he do this? Because that girl that died that night probably didn't do anything. What it was the story that he had created most of his life. So as I drop the trap and I'm talking to him and I go, hey, how are you? Because I hadn't seen him for such a long time, and this was the first interaction that I had. And he goes, oh, miss, I'm not good. I'm not good. And I said, what's going on? And he goes, these thoughts in my head. I don't know how to make them stop. And I'm thinking how tormented he must have been because of the shame and the blame that he's probably experienced because of what he's done. And I said to him, can I share a story with you? And he goes, yes, please. And I said, I was in a McDonald's store one day, and I walked in, grabbed a meal, sat down, eating it on my own, and next minute I watched this family walk in. And as they walked in, I got really drawn to this young boy. And I noticed something about him, and his energy was just a little off. And anyway, he came in, he sat down, his parents were around about, I thought was about 24, and this guy was about 8. And the first thought that came into my head was, man, they must have had kids young. And anyway, he's sitting there, his head's down, and next minute his dad goes, sit up! I'm thinking, oh, that didn't feel good. And next minute, he's saying, what does everyone want? And he's sitting there and he's going, He said, I haven't got all day. I said, come on, what are you going to order? And at this point, I'm starting to squirm in my stomach. And next minute, he goes up, gets the meal, comes back, sits down at the table, and I'm watching this kid, and he's hardly moving at all, and his head's moving down, and he's going like this. And next minute, I watch him go out to get this cup, right, his drink, and his hand's just shaking like this. And I'm noticing all of this, and next minute, drink spills over. And Dad unleashes. You idiot, you stupid fool, how dare you? You're such an embarrassment. You embarrass me. I'm done. And I'm just, right now, my stomach and my heart is in my throat. And I'm sitting there and I'm frozen. I'm thinking, just do something, Fiona, do something, do something, do something. And I'm sitting there frozen to my seat, and everybody else in the restaurant is frozen to their seat. And at that, I made up an excuse in my head and I walked out the door. And I'm thinking, I've regretted that day ever since. I thought I should have stood up. I should have done something. What could I have done? What could you do in that situation? And then I looked at the prisoner and I said, if you had an opportunity in that moment, right, Dad got up, went to the toilet, and you had an opportunity to say something to that boy, what would you say? And he goes, I'd tell him he's all right. And I said, why is he all right? And he said, because his dad shouldn't be treating him that way. And I said, so how should he be treating him? He said, he should be loving him. He should be teaching him. But he's not. And I said, what do you think of the dad's behaviour? And I said, he shouldn't be doing that. Right? He's playing a power game with him. Don't listen to your dad, he'd say. Right? He's playing a power game. He should be treating you with love, not with this anger, not with this judgment. And then I hopped down and I looked eyeball to eyeball at him and I said, exactly. And I said, I don't know who said what to you in your childhood, who's labelled you, who's told you that you're not enough. And I said, but in this moment, I want you to remember this conversation because you've just told me the truth. The truth is that you're all right, kid. And I said, next time when you have that moment where you have those thoughts come into your head, right, and those thoughts that come into your head because someone's talked them into your life. You never were born with those. They've been talked into your life. I want you to remember this moment, and I want you to remember to say that you're all right, kid, and look after that little boy that's inside of you, because that boy deserves to be loved and to never have a power game played with him. And he goes, thanks, miss. I really appreciate it. Thank you. No one's ever spoken to me like this before. And I said, the reason why I did it was because I know that in the moment that I regretted, I learnt. And I learnt to change a life. And he said, well, why would you do that to me? Why would you speak to me like that? And I said, because I respect life. I respect my life. I respect your life. And your life is worth respecting. Because I knew in that moment, if he ever pondered on what he had done to his girlfriend, that he would think that he was not deserving. So by being a prison officer and also working as an empowerment coach and also working in extreme adversities and working with victims of crime, it's given me a great perspective of understanding violence. So my whole goal is that if we're going to not do acts of violence, then how can we change acts of violence? And it's by understanding the perspective of figuring out what we can do in a moment, not what we were scared of doing or what we've lashed out at doing. And how many times in our life have we done that? Where we didn't feel comfortable and we berated someone or we judged them or we labelled them. And so what it is that there's three major fears that every human being tries to avoid in their life. Number one, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough, smart enough, rich enough, poor enough, white enough, black enough, religious enough. I've gone to so many schools and I've said, and you're not religious enough. And I just get all of these, like this. And I'm interested that if I'm not good enough, who gets to be the ruler of my life? Who gets to tell me that I'm not instead of I am? And what I'm looking at is that if we're going to change the narrative, is that what if we can move out of the sense of judgment and the rulership over somebody else's life and actually take that moment and do something else with it? Because if we're not enough, then the second fear comes out. Will I be loved? Will I be cared for? Will I be thought about? Will someone just see my importance? Will someone even just see me? Right? And if that happens, then the third fear comes out. Do I belong? Will I be accepted or will I be rejected? And I know a lot of people have done extreme acts of behaviour to actually move away from rejection. And I actually think that a lot of people fear rejection more than they value their life. They fear rejection more than they value their life. And if you take that out for play time and time and time and time again, and you've always got this fear hanging over you, this is where you can move to a point where you can actually do extreme things. I fear rejection more than I value life. This is where you can get murder. This is where you can get domestic violence happening. And I'm not saying that it's right. What I'm saying is that if we take a moment to understand it, then maybe we can have a different conversation with people. So what happens is that if these three fears are brought out, we often will develop what I call a primary story. And that primary story is usually developed before the age of 7. And it's the first time in our life when we're actually not enough. And what happens is we develop immense neurology and we make up a story. Now, if you're before 7, you're going to bring this story with a childlike understanding of the world. And it's not about making sense. It's about justifying what's going on around you. So here's some of the stories that I've experienced with some of the people that I've talked about or talked with. I'm a rejection. That's the primary story. And what they do is they grab that primary story and they take every experience that they have in life now through that filter. Is this person rejecting me? Is this person going to reject me? Am I being rejected right now? And as long as it doesn't happen, everything's good. All right, so they actually, life is good. I don't have to worry about anything. I don't have to react to anything. I've also heard, I don't matter. I'm not lovable. I had one student that I worked with, the teachers asked me to talk with her because they said she had an anger problem. I sat down with her, and as I'm talking to her, she started saying, well, I know what my primary story is. And I said, what is it? And she goes, I'm a mistake. And I said, how do you know that? And she goes, because before I was born and all of my life, my mum has told me that I should have had an abortion. Then she was sexually abused by her father for 5 years. At the age of 10, she fought him off, went to the police, got him arrested, and he actually spent time in jail. Why that husband left, she got a divorce, then remarried. Then the stepfather went to jail. I don't know what he went to jail for, but when he came out, he had an ankle bracelet on. That tells me that he's probably not allowed to have access to children. She's 14 at this stage. So mum kicks her out to bring the stepfather back into the house. And now she's at school and the teachers are telling me she has an anger problem. And they said, can you talk to her? And I said, absolutely. So she's sitting there and I'm talking about this and I said, you know what? You don't have an anger problem. I said, you've got a kick-ass self-defense mechanism. I said, I would love to teach people about. All right, you could be someone that could come in and teach people how to be passionate, how to be courageous, how to be brave, and how to be a role model to stand up for yourself and speak out into the world. And at this, I'm watching this girl. The whole time I'd worked with her for 2 days and she did not smile once. And in this moment, I just watched her just pull up and I watched a smile come onto her face because I wanted to give her in that moment, maybe this was the only chance that she was going to get for a while, that she was enough. She wasn't just enough, that she was brilliant and she could be a leader because everybody else had told her she was nothing. So if we're going to build someone's self-worth, how can we do it? And I call it the jellybean theory. I take this out into schools and I teach kids, how can you learn to be powerful in who you are? So it's a concept, but what I always say to the kids is you're born with a full cup of jelly beans. All right, you've got everything in life that you need to be able to do something phenomenal and amazing with. But what happens is when you put it out there, you get a praise point, jelly bean in. Someone gives you a payout, jelly bean out, right? Something amazing happens to you, a whole heap of jelly beans go in. You get a massive adversity, trauma, whole heap go out. And if you experience real extreme violence or adversity or real rejection where there's a lot of blame and shame, where you feel like you are nothing, you don't just have a cup now. Someone's come along with their story and used you as a power game and smashed it. And now your life is shattered. Right now, I could come in and I could be the best motivational speaker that I could, and I could get a whole heap of jelly beans and chuck it in this cup. But how much is that cup going to hold? It's not going to be full. You're only ever going to hold about 6 or 8. And it's sitting in there, and that's what they're going to use, the energy for life, to go out and try something new. And trying something new might take 2 or 3 jelly beans, a risk. And they're not prepared to do that. And what happens is if you're in a situation, and I call this drowning mentality, what happens is that you're in life, you're in the waters of life, and then there's a rip and it pulls you out. And you're out in this water and you're swimming, it doesn't matter how much energy you have, you get nowhere. You're still in the perils of life and whether life is going to be going on or whether you're going to die. And right now you're sitting there and you're swimming and swimming and swimming, and now you're down to your last jelly bean. And then all of a sudden you start going under. You start going under and you think, one more breath, one more breath, one more breath, please, just one more breath. And you're fighting your way to the surface. And then the lifesaver comes out to save you. What then happens is with that lifesaver, the person grabs hold of them, and what do they sometimes do? pull them under to get one more breath. Because this is the time when there is no longer any cognitive thinking anymore. This is when you are in desperation. And if you're in desperation, you'll kill the people that are around you to get one more breath. And that's where you get violence. Violence is going to come out when you're in that situation. So if we're not going to get to a desperate state, and this is why I go into schools and I teach, because I'm looking at how do I prevent this desperate situation. I work with the people who have been very successful at very adverse behaviour. But if I'm going to make a change, I have to do it with a generation. So I teach them about, okay, how do we gather all of these pieces back together? So I use another tool, and this next tool is what I call love and trust or fear and doubt. We either live in love and trust in a single second, or we live in fear and doubt in a single second. And if we're going to choose, which one do you want to choose? Do you want to live in love and trust, or do you want to live in fear and doubt? Right? Because I'm both hands up for love and trust. Right? But what it is it's about doing love and trust when life gets hard. It's not when it's easy, it's life when it gets hard. And what this is that I'm going to consistently create a pattern in my life where that I can sequence, right, continually doing the same thing. So I mightn't get it right at the start. So what I'm doing is I've got to figure out, okay, how do I get jelly beans in my cup? So the first thing to do, and I liken it to the Japanese art of kintsugi, which is where you get broken pieces of pottery and you bring them together and you mould it and you solder it with gold. All right? And I look at love and trust is the gold in our life. So what I'm going to do is I have to start creating a new story. What is that story? What can I do different? And I've got to learn to figure out, well, what is my identity? And I'm not going to allow anybody else to be my ruler anymore. I'm actually going to take control of my rulership. I'm going to be the king or the queen of my kingdom. And so therefore, what rules am I going to make that I can follow, that I can achieve? Not somebody else's rules where they make it so hard and I can't get to it. So what's the first thing that I do? Fiona, you can just smile in this moment. And just a smile can put a jelly bean in, right? But what it is that that's a piece of gold that gathers the first shattered piece together, all right? And then I can say, what else do I do well? Well, I have a good heart. That's another one, right? How do I make it easy for me to gather the pieces, and then as I consistently create that pattern, start to mould and solder that cup into a full cup. And then what I do is as I do it and I get the hang of it, what I call it I start to make a jelly bean making machine, all right? Which means that how do I self-talk? What's my self-talk going on in here? All right, and so every day I'm thinking about what can I do to improve my life, heal my life, make my life more and more better. And so I've got to have a story that's empowering. So I've been through massive abuse in my life. I've been through bushfires. I was born and I was adopted. And I've looked at every part of that story. How can I change it from wounded to mended? All right, and so therefore what I did was, my story was that I was a rejection. So I took the rejection, went and found my mother, and she never rejected me. Now the second thing you need to do is make sure you tell the story truthfully. Don't tell the story drama, right? You'll never get over that. That's a bullshit story, right? I've heard people say, oh my God, right? They're never going to get over this situation. I chuck that story out. You have the ability to get over anything if you change the story. See what I'm doing? I'm gathering, right? I'm brilliant. I'm amazing. I've got such a passion for life, right? I work in a prison. People say, oh my God, aren't you scared? And I said, no, every day I am looking for the single moment that I may get, the opportunity that I may get to be able to change a world through healing my life to show how I can heal somebody else's. I will be the leader. By being the person who's walked the path before them so that they have an idea of how to walk the path behind me. And sometimes I'll walk beside them, sometimes I'll walk behind them, sometimes I'll carry them. And every day I think about how I can do that. Because when I truly love the world around me and truly love me within the world, then that's when I can go from wounded to mended. That will help me find my strength, my power, my love. Thank you.